Hey Pennsylvania, it's wine o'clock on Wine Time PA. Join Rob, Holly, and Steve as they explore their home state of Pennsylvania and all the wonderful wineries it has to offer. Each month, they take a journey tasting the wines of PA. If you're able, pour a glass of your favorite wine and join us now for Wine Time.
Welcome again to Wine Time PA. For those new to our podcast, we are a wine-loving trio exploring their home state of Pennsylvania, trying to visit its over 400 wineries. I'm one of your hosts, Rob, and today I'm joined with my co-host, Holly.
Hi, everyone.
And Steve.
Hello there.
In this episode, we will be discussing our visit to Adams County Winery, located about 15-minute drive outside of Gettysburg in the town of Orrtanna. I believe the name of the winery comes from the county that it's located in, but that's just a hunch. We didn't actually confirm that.
Good hunch.
Yeah, I think you're safe there.
Yeah, that's a pretty safe bet there. Adams County Winery, yeah. We visited in the summer of 2024, so the information we share today is from that time frame. We also want to mention that they do have a second wine shop located in the town of Gettysburg, so if you happen to be in town doing a battlefield tour, they do have two locations for you to try their wines.
I have to comment. I have always loved the town of Gettysburg. The history and the stories you can find there are so fascinating. It's one of those places I love going for a quick weekend getaway. If you've never been, even if you're not a big history buff or fan, I think it's worth checking out. It's just a really cool town. I've never been to the main winery before, but I actually tried their wines before during a visit, but it had been a while. I was at their wine shop, and I don't really remember much about their wine, so I was excited to go back. But I did remember Tears of Gettysburg, because that wine was highly advertised down there. It's a wine they actually bottled in 1988, and it's in honor of the 125th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's actually one of the oldest continually made wines in the state.
Yeah, that's an interesting fact. And this was my first time visiting the Adams County Winery. And I was looking forward to this visit as well, mostly because, the interesting fact of they're the fifth oldest operating winery in the state and the 12th in the state to be approved for a license. And they opened up in 1975, which is just 50 years ago. So that's some pretty amazing history and stats that they have.
Yeah, it's really wild to think that 50 years ago, they were the 12th winery in Pennsylvania, considering there are 400 today. It really kind of shows how much wine has evolved and grown in Pennsylvania in a relatively short amount of time. In fact, fun fact, Pennsylvania is the number 4 biggest wine producer by volume in the United States.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that from Pennsylvania.
Go us.
Yeah. I'm sure everybody's wondering what number 1, 2, and 3 are, so I won't hold you. But it's California, obviously, at number
Shocking.
1.
Duh.
Yeah. They produce 680 million gallons every year, and that's actually down. And that is also as much as all other 49 states combined.
Wow.
So, yeah, California is pretty much where all the wine comes from, but we love our Pennsylvania wines. Washington is number 2 at 40.7 million gallons, and New York is 3rd at 28 million gallons. And Oregon is just behind us with 11.8 million. So we better keep our 4th spot.
We'll do our best to help them along that way in that process. Some more interesting facts about Adams County Winery. They do grow their own grapes, but don't grow enough to meet their production needs. However, all of their grapes or juice they purchase does come from Pennsylvania, so all wines are 100% Pennsylvania grown and produced. The gardens at the winery are also certified as a wildlife habitat. And the barn the winery operates out of was raised in 1860 and is a registered historical barn within the county. It also has some original woodwork visible in the tasting room.
Yeah. I absolutely love the barn and the garden setting this place. We've visited some really beautiful wineries this year, but this one might be my favorite. I just loved the big red traditional barn. They had that beautiful stone patio outside with lots of tables and chairs to sit on. They also had the grounds, like the garden, you mentioned the habitat wildlife. It was beautiful. It was beautifully landscaped. I love that around the grounds and stuff too. They had picnic tables and like Adirondack chairs. There were just so many places that you could just sit and sprawl out. I even liked they had a nice little pavilion area that looks like they use for events. And I kind of like that it was outside the town as well. Like you kind of drove through these rolling hills and these orchards. Because at first I was like, are we going to a winery? I'm not sure. But it was the type of place where, like, honestly, if I lived close, I would probably take a book and go there often and just read with a glass of wine.
Yeah, the drive was really interesting and really lovely. You're driving down these roads that sometimes just feel like one lane, and you're flanked on both sides by these peach orchards, which took us a minute. I remember we argued a little bit,
Yeah.
like, these apples are they peaches? But then you got that distinct orange kind of coloring.
Pinkish
on them.
coloring of the
And
peaches.
I actually felt like just going off and picking one off a tree and eating it right there, but, I'm not going to do that.
They probably weren't ripened enough yet, though. The winery is open 7 days a week, except they close on some holidays, and you do not need a reservation to visit. However, they do offer 2 different tours that include tastings that you can book in advance if that's something you are interested in. When we arrived at the winery, we went inside the barn to the gift shop and the tasting room. You'll notice when you walk in a line with paper menus on one side that you can grab. When it's your turn, you can go up to the counter and order what you want. They have an outdoor terrace bistro you may see when you walk in if you visit during that time frame. It's only open on Fridays through Sunday and from the months of May through October, so basically it's open during the warm season. If you want something from there, you have to order and pay for it inside when you get your drinks. They serve wood-fired pizzas and a Parmesan garlic Bavarian pretzel, which we both tried. The pizza was so good, and I gotta say that pretzel was just phenomenal.
Yeah, they were both really good, but I loved that pretzel. Even if I didn't like the wine, which, spoiler alert, I did, I would go back for just that pretzel.
Yeah, I love that pretzel too. It was so just soft and delicious. The outside was just perfectly cooked.
It was large, too.
It was,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
because
was
very
shared
large.
it.
Yeah, it was
Although
so good.
we could have shared a second one, and that would have been fine.
Yeah, I could have just got my own. I really should have, honestly. But
Yeah, they also had some blocks of cheese inside that you could get, and they had some pre-cut cheese platters. There were some other snacks as well that could be purchased. After we checked out, we actually noticed that they had some chocolate-covered pretzels too, which I kind of wish I'd have seen before I checked out, to be honest with you.
Me too.
they look good.
Next time. You're also allowed to bring your own food to the winery, which was, really nice that that's an option. In terms of wine offerings, the tasting sheet is broken down into 3 categories. They have white wines, 5 on the day we visited, 3 dry, 1 semi, 2 sweet. Red wines, which they had 2 dry, 1 semi, and 2 sweet. And specialty wines, which they had 12 when we visited, and they were listed as sweets and semi-sweets with 2 dessert wines in the mix. Flights came with 4 wines. They had 3 pre-selected flights, or you could do a custom flight. It's just that the custom flights cost a couple bucks more.
Yeah. And if you're not into wine, but you want an adult beverage, they do have beer and cider offerings, which is cool because you go buy those orchards. When we were there, they had 3 hard ciders available, 6 different beers sold by the can, and 4 beers on draft. And they were all craft beers, and it was really nice in terms of the variety and the type of beer as well. It wasn't just like all IPAs or anything. It was a nice selection. And in terms of non-alcoholic drinks, I noticed they had bottled water as well as some specialty sodas. And I think all the sodas had that sort of old-time fashion feel. Like I noticed root beer and birch beer, which, if you're not familiar with birch beer from Pennsylvania, it's something you should try at least once in your life.
Yeah, I've never seen it outside of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Maybe a little in New York, but
Yeah, I think it's an Amish thing, but it's worth trying. And also, as far as non-alcoholic, they also had some plain just non-alcoholic grape juice, which I thought was kind of cool.
All right, well, it's time to move on to the fun part and talk about the wines themselves. For those not familiar with our podcast, this is the part where we each give you our top 3 recommendations from our visit. We are not being paid or endorsed by the winery or any organization on our suggestions. The recommendations we give are of our own opinions and personal preferences. We are also big believers in not worrying about what other people might think of the wine you're drinking and just drink what you love. I'm going to go first today with my number 3 pick, but before I reveal my pick, I just want to take a note that I was a little nervous visiting this winery as a majority of the wines listed were on the sweet side. Regular listeners of the podcast, you'll know that I don't always seek out those sweet wines. I tend to stay on the drier side, but I do enjoy an occasional glass. That said, I did find myself enjoying many of the wines there, even the sweet wines. And so that just leads me to my number 3 pick, which was on the sweeter side, and that was their Goldie's Appleberry Bliss. According to their website, this was a wine named after their beloved golden retriever, Goldie. And this was a apple wine. Apple wines are probably my favorite fruit wine, or at least non-grape wines out there. And this one was really good, I found. It was a blend of apple and even some strawberry in there, which was a unique twist on an apple wine. And definitely get both flavors in the tasting and even in the aromas. I was thrown off a bit by my initial smell of the wine. I was picking up a lot of earthy, musky tones. Something you would see maybe or experience with like a Riesling. But I tell you what, this was just a silky smooth strawberry apple wine, and it was great for dinner or just sipping on a hot day, and just a really wonderful apple wine.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. I like this one as well. I considered it for an honorable mention. I liked that it was kind of a tart apple in the taste, more like a Granny Smith, and then it finished with all fruit. To me, it really fit the setting of those nearby orchards well, because it just reminded me of like where we were, you know, with that apple, that crisp tart apple taste.
Yeah, I got a little notes of like green apple in that. I thought it was really nice.
Yeah.
I like the tartness. My third pick is 3 Ships to the Wind. So this is a semi-sweet red blend, which is basically, you know, in my favorite category of wines. It was wonderfully fruity in the beginning and just seemed like this nice sweet wine, but then it had this drier finish that just felt nice coming down off of that sweetness. So it was a really good, you know, mix of the two. There was a bit of spice in that finish, which added just a nice touch. The description says it could be used in a sangria or in a mulled wine, and I kind of want to try both, actually.
Yeah.
I could see it going, you know, both ways
I
really
think you're right
easy.
on that.
I actually took very few notes on this wine just because I was enjoying it so much.
Yeah, it says something when you're enjoying a wine, because when we go for these podcasts, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be writing down what I like about it. You know?
Sometimes when you're really enjoying it, you just kind of forget.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 3 pick is the Cotton Candy, and it's a sweet blush wine. I kind of have to go with what Rob said. I was a little nervous because, you know, I can drink sweet wines, but they're not kind of my go-to, but I really like this one. I was worried it would be like drinking pure sugar because, let's face it, eating cotton candy is basically just eating sugar. But it was sweet, but it wasn't too sweet in my opinion. Like, it was one of those ones that I probably wouldn't sit there and drink glass after glass, but I would be content with this perfectly after dinner sometime as like a dessert. You do get some of the cotton candy flavor, but what really stood out to me in my mouth was I was getting strawberry and candy apple. And honestly, it reminded me of visiting a summer fair or a carnival, and it was summer when we visited, so I think it just kind of fit that, but it just made me think summer fair, carnival, cotton candy, and it just worked really well together. Nostalgia.
I'm glad you picked this one because I almost put this one on my list. That's how good this wine really was. Even for a super sweet blush wine, I really enjoyed this one as well.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think I could drink the whole bottle, but you know, it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this also. It was a bit too sweet for me, but oh man, 100% it had the aroma
Absolutely.
and the taste of cotton candy. There was no mistaking what it was. They really nailed that flavor.
Okay, so like Steve found one too sweet that Rob and I didn't. What is happening today?
I don't know. We switched bodies or something.
I think it's the type of sweetness. I enjoy sweetness when it's fruit based.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was still really lovely. I really enjoyed it.
It was good.
Yeah.
So my number 2 pick is the Rusty's Red. Now, I feel like I just can't be part of an episode unless I pick something that is off-brand for me, trying to teach the world that you just have to try things outside of your wheelhouse because you never know what you're going to find. And this is that wine. It's a mixture of Concord, yum, said before I love the Concord, and Steuben, which I just don't like. And, you know, if you love Steuben, great. Something about the taste I've just never enjoyed. I don't know why, but I just love the pairing of these two together. Whatever that flavor is in Steuben, the Concord just kept it bay. And the Steuben just kept that Concord from being too sweet and like grape juice. And it just made this really nice blend that works so well together. Seriously, though, when you go to a winery, try something you probably won't like because you just never know. Branch out occasionally, take a sip of somebody else's, just give it a whirl, even if it sounds like it's not going to be something you like. I wouldn't have tried this on my own. And turns out it's my number 2 pick. So
yeah. I surprisingly enjoyed the Rusty Red also. I definitely got those Concord notes, and the fruit grape juice from it, but there was something in the blend that gave it a finished flavor. I actually put in my notes I was getting vanilla and cream, so I was thinking of like almost like a mild vanilla ice cream flavor in my mouth when I was drinking it that I found was unique.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So my number 2 pick is Moscato.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, did we get our notes mixed up here?
Yeah, no, seriously. Usually I leave the Moscatos to Steve. And listeners, if you've listened in the past or to our intro, I think I mentioned that Moscato was one of those wines I used to drink a lot and I kind of moved away from it. And I still do enjoy a glass from time to time, but this one really jumped out at me that day. When I first smelled it, I could tell it was Moscato right away. It was overwhelming with that orange blossom smell.
Yeah, that was the best part. I love that aroma from a Moscato. It's half the reason I love drinking them.
Yeah, and I could tell it, so I knew what it was. And I was worried from the smell that it was going to be too sweet, as I don't care for sickeningly sweet Moscatos, but it wasn't. It had lots of tropical fruit notes to this Moscato, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was really fun and refreshing on the tongue, and it had a really nice light finish that I enjoyed.
Yeah, it really was a great pick. In fact, this actually scored the same as my number 3 pick. I just kind of wanted to do something a little different, so I'm glad somebody else picked this. It was a really good Moscato.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And, that I think transitions into my next pick, which again is another wine that's a fruit wine that I don't often seek. But this one was their Splash of Summer, which is their watermelon wine. Now, this was one of the few non-sweet wines they had listed. It was listed as a semi-sweet, and I think that helped me a little bit with this wine, not being in the sweet category. It was pared down a little bit. This is a watermelon wine, which I love nearly as much as apple wines. And this had just some nice hints of berries, maybe even a little currants in there. And it was just really refreshing and just delicious to try. And, I see a watermelon wine on the list. I'm going to try it. And this one is definitely worth the purchase.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one as well. I think I was torn between that and the cotton candy for my number 3 pick because it was something really nice and refreshing about that. I mean, I love a good juicy watermelon in the summer, and it reminded me of that I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it's hard to get a watermelon, flavoring drink right sometimes. And this, it's nailed it pretty good.
Yep. All right, I think we're on to our number 1 picks, right?
Yep, kick us off, Holly.
All right. So going back to probably which is more traditional, Holly, my number 1 is the Turning Point. And the Turning Point is one of their dry reds that they have available. So when I got this, I smelled it and I was getting like aromas of leather, smoke, and tobacco with some berry or some fruit in it. And I did get some of that like smoke in the taste, but it wasn't overpowering. Same thing with the leather. It was very subtle. I was a little worried about the tobacco because I don't mind it, but I don't like to taste the tobacco in my wine, but I couldn't really taste it in there because I'm not a big tobacco fan, and I was really glad that I couldn't taste it. But the berry notes came off in the finish, and then it just finished the wine nicely. I also really enjoyed the tannins in this one, and it was a warmer summer day, and usually on a warmer summer day, I gravitate towards the sweeter chilled things, probably hence why my picks were what they were before, but this one really hit all the right marks for me that day.
Yeah, that was a pretty nice dry red, and I had it probably listed somewhere around my honorable mention category, just because I like dry red wines. But my number 1 pick is actually also a drier wine. It's their dry white wine, and it's their Saval.
That was nice too.
Yeah, you've been liking Savals more lately.
Yeah, I've seen them more often, and I've been trying them more, and I'm finding I'm just really liking Savals. Like I don't know where that's coming from, but I'm going to keep trying them. This is listed as a dry wine, as I said, so it's one of their non-sweet wines. This was just a lovely wine. It was bright and crisp. It had aromas and tastes of strawberries and melons, like honeydew, maybe even some peaches in there. If you're not familiar with the Saval, and certainly wasn't too familiar with this grape, it's a French hybrid grape with similar profiles to Pinot Grigios, Sauvignon Blancs, Rieslings, and even Chardonnays. So if you're a fan of any of those wines, I would encourage you to check out the Savals because they do have similar profiles in taste and aromas out there. And actually, I'm kind of kicking myself for not buying a bottle of this. But I ended up buying a bottle of the cotton candy just because I knew I was going to be visiting my sister in a couple of days. And she likes the sweeter wines, and I knew she would probably like the cotton candy over the Saval. But, man, I really kicking myself for not getting a bottle of the Saval because that was really good.
Yeah,
it's funny. That's not even the first time you've bought a cotton candy wine to take your sister's out.
No. Again, I was being nice to my sister. Shout out Heather,
Yeah, and I just say real quick, I enjoyed the Saval as well. It was probably in that honorable mention category for me, higher on my list. And it's funny because I do like Pinot Grigio, Sauv Blanc, Riesling. So, I mean, this was it was a very nice white wine.
Yeah, it really was. I tend to like Savals when they're semi-dry instead of dry, which it probably would have gotten a little higher on my list had that been the case. But yeah, it's still a really interesting grape that I'm also excited to keep trying.
So what was your number one pick?
Well, I'm going to also go with the typical Steve pick, and I'm going to go with Stray Cat Strut, which is their semi-sweet Catawba. Which, Catawba, it's right on my alley. So this one has a little bit more acidity than you would typically find in a Catawba, and that usually is a sore spot for me, but it works in this wine really well. I've said repeatedly that I love a good Catawba, and this is just an all-around really nice representation of a Catawba wine. It's a little different than most, but in that difference, it has all this beautiful, wonderful charm that I just really enjoyed.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we kind of all circled back to our normal picks for number one. The world makes sense again to me. Okay.
Yeah, we started off a little different, but
Well, that's good. That shows that we're willing to branch out from our comfort zones.
yeah, it's just not me yelling at everybody else to branch out. Everybody is branching out.
We are.
Well, before we wrap things up, is there any other wines we want to give a shout out to? Steve, anything else that stood out?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Peachy Blues. So this is a peach fruit wine, which is probably my favorite fruit wine if I'm going to pick. I don't normally drink a lot of fruit wines unless I want a nice dessert, but this one was just interesting because it had all this beautiful, rich peach flavor. But bam, there was this little bit of subtle blueberry, and you could tell the blueberry was there, but it didn't diminish the peach at all. The two fruits just played really well together, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great on that nice hot day.
Yeah.
Holly, any other shout outs?
Yeah, actually, I want to give a shout out to the Chardonnay. I know that's one of those wines that not a lot of us gravitate towards. I think I have picked a Chardonnay or two in the past, but they're just kind of here and there that I enjoy them. This was one of them that I really enjoyed. It was an oak Chardonnay, which I know especially Steve isn't a big fan of the oak Chardonnays, and I'm, so on those. But this one was really nice. It had that oak flavor, but it was mild, and it played well because there was this really nice nut and caramel flavor. And there was that kind of creamy finish that you sometimes get with Chardonnay. It actually kind of reminded me of drinking a caramel latte. And I mean, you didn't have the coffee. It was definitely wine, but I love a good caramel latte, and it put me in that mindset. So I really enjoyed the Chardonnay, and it was one that was really close to making my list.
So I'll give one final shout out on a wine, and it's kind of an unusual one, which may be why I gravitated toward it. It was called Scrapple. Now, if you're from Pennsylvania, especially the southeastern part of the state, you probably know what Scrapple is.
Geez, I'm from Pennsylvania, and I know the term, and I still don't know what Scrapple is.
I had it as a kid. It's been a while, though.
It's one of my absolutely favorite breakfast sides. And for those who don't, and I'm not going to go in too long, but it's just basically scraps of meat with seasoning and cornmeal. You grill it up nice and crispy. But anyway, I just want to say that this wine did not have any scraps of meat in it.
Well, that's a relief.
So don't be fooled by the name. I think it was just they kind of put some scraps of wine. I kind of envision them kind of scraping together some bits of this, bits of that to put a wine together. But this one was made actually from an apple wine, was their core, which is probably why I also kind of gravitated toward it. But it had some spices in there. It had like cinnamon, maybe even some cloves. Certainly had some pepper in there, which pepper is a staple spice of Scrapple. Mm-hmm. But they also mixed some cranberries in this. So this is kind of like a cranberry apple wine. But again, it was really good wine, but I could envision that being warmed up in the fall and being even better. So, Scrapple.
That's funny, too, because you're not a big fan of cranberries. So
I'm not a big cranberry fan, and I didn't even know this had cranberries until after I started drinking a little bit of it. But the name is unusual, especially for a wine. But, man, it was actually pretty good.
So I got to trust the winemaker sometimes.
That's right.
Know what they're doing.
And don't be afraid to try stuff, as we all can attest to with our picks today.
It's like I need to go try Scrapple again because it's been a long time since I've had Scrapple.
It.
I mean, not just this wine, but I'm thinking the actual Scrapple meat. Anyway.
So though we admit we were a little nervous visiting this winery when we took a look at the menu and its heavier, sweeter style of wines, this historic property was well worth the visit. It is one we recommend checking out if you are in the Gettysburg area, either at their main winery or their wine shop. For more information about either, please visit their website, adamscountywinery.com. That concludes this month's episode. We appreciate you listening. If you haven't liked and subscribed to this podcast or our social media accounts, please do. Tune in next month as we share our experiences and recommendations from another wonderful winery in Pennsylvania. Until next time, cheers.
Thanks for listening to Wine Time PA with your host Rob, Holly, and Steve. We hope you enjoyed our take on Pennsylvania wineries and all that they have to offer. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. Also, be sure to follow them on social media for updates and news. Remember, when it comes to wine, drink what you love.